Sodor's Legend of the Freaking Lost Treasure. That quote may or may not be stolen from the Unlucky Tug. So, it's been 10 years since it's made its debut in Australia and New Zealand theaters, and as usual with these, I don't need to explain at this point, but I am regardless cause doi doi, Sammy stupid, I'm gonna be reviewing in honor of its many anniversaries this year. Not gonna linger on the opening this time around, so I'ma jump straight into the review. First off, let's talk about the animation. The animation is the same new lighting that Art began using in The Adventure Begins, and I already gave my opinion of it there. It's my favorite look for the series. However, I wanted to focus more on the cinematography, cause it looks gorgeous. They really went all out on this movie. I mean, yeah, the cinematography of the specials was already one of ARC or Jam Field's strong suits. Everybody knows that. But I do think this is where it peaked here. There are so many cool and dynamic shots and angles to look at. It's almost worth watching this movie just for that alone, as well as the soundtrack, which I'll get into in a bit. I think one of my favorite visuals is during the chase sequence near the end, and the sky progressively getting redder all the way up to Sailor John's defeat. Very, very nice all around. The music. Like the animators, the composers for this movie went all out. Robert and Pierre Hartshorn and the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra's soundtrack for this movie is phenomenal. Like, Magic Railroad soundtrack was already freaking good, and, well, it kind of had to be with it being a theatrical release worldwide. They didn't have to go this far with another standard, and I use that lightly by the way, Thomas movie, but they did, and I'm so happy they did. They wanted to make this like the Thomas movie of the year, or century. I don't know what else to say, really. I'll just be repeating myself. I'll say this. My favorite piece of the soundtrack is the chase sequence, especially towards the end with that choir performance when Sailor John loses the treasure. I've actually been listening to that piece a lot more the past month, and it sounds better every time I listen to it. I should also mention the 2, or technically 3 songs that are in this movie, and I like them a lot too. Never Overlook a Little Engine is a very nice tune, and it's interesting that this was the start, unless you count Thomas the Core Engine, of the engines being the ones to sing the songs and them existing within the universe. I don't mind this change at all, and I think this was a good way to kind of kick that trend off. Then there's We Make a Team Together, which I already liked before when I was a kid, but I began appreciating it more as I got older. Overall, the music is really good, and the songs are solid. The characters. First, I'm going to be looking over the new characters, and then I'll get into the others who play key roles, as well as the characters who came back in this special. Ryan was a very fun character. Admittedly, he kind of feels like Stanley in some areas, but at least they did more with Ryan in further appearances than what they did with Stanley in 12 seasons. That's not to say I dislike Stanley, by the way. I like him, but goddamn did they do him dirty. Going back to Ryan, I like his design. I like the fact that he's purple, as there isn't many purple characters in the series, even including the Coley Fell engines. I also like Eddie Redmayne's performance as him. Not much else for me to say, unfortunately, on him, as he doesn't do too many things that I would consider noteworthy enough of listing off, no offense, so I'll move on to the next characters. Skiff was another fun character. I like how, until the end, he puts up with Sailor John's aggressive and kind of abusive behavior. Not saying that that kind of relationship is healthy in any way, but it shows the kind of person that Skiff is. He tries to have a positive outlook on life, and that's something I appreciate about him. I'm glad that he, along with Ryan, got to do more in future appearances, and I like that they managed to keep Jamie Campbell as the voice of him all the way to the show's end, as they couldn't do that with every celebrity actor they had on the show. And I understand why, of course, but I also just really enjoy his performance as the character. Also, does anyone remember the time when Skiff's name was revealed prior to what we knew what he was going to look like, and there was speculation that Samson or Glenn was Skiff? You had to be on YouTube during that time to know what I'm talking about. Sailor John was hella awesome. Having a human villain for once was a bold choice, and considering the fact that he is a human, he comes off as a bit more threatening. Not just with how he treats Skiff, but with what he enacts during the final showdown. Sure, you have Diesel 10 with the claw, but you can't win against a person who's holding a lit fuse of dynamite. I may like Diesel 10 more overall, but as a villain, I think Sailor John stands clear. I like how he tries to put on this calm and kind demeanor when around Thomas, up until their second outing when he begins to think that Thomas was leading him on, and that's when he snaps. John Hurt, rest in peace, did a phenomenal performance. I can tell he really enjoyed playing Sailor John, especially during this part.
I want my treasure!
For the first time in about 20 years, we finally have some Railway Series characters debuting in the TV series. Mike, Rex, and Bert. Man, I remember coming back to school one day and seeing the trailer and going nuts over pretty much everything, but I think seeing them was what I went nuts over the most. Now, there was already prior knowledge that they would be appearing in the special, and I knew about this from the 2 take-and-play prototypes that dropped before the trailer and this brief clip that showed the also hopper wagons. Like Ryan, they don't do too much here, but their appearance is still welcomed, and I like their little subplot with Marion, which takes inspiration from their debut story in the Railway series, where James and Henry thought they were some kind of magic. That was really fun. I also like that their voice actors give them West Country accents. At least, I believe they're West Country accents. I'll also just say this now that Mike is my favorite out of the 3, and is probably somewhere in my top 10 for favorite characters. Now that we got the new characters out the way, let me quickly go through the returnees for the special. Alfie, Oliver, Max, Monty, Donald, Douglas, and Daisy all return in the special. Man, oh man, the time it was to be a Thomas fan. Seeing these guys on screen in CGI was incredible. Unfortunately, none of them really play significant roles. Max and Monty don't even speak. But it is nice to see them again, and they all get to do more come Series 20. Now on to the older characters that did something in the special. Of course, we have our main character, Thomas. I really like the arc that Thomas goes through. He goes from being brash and irresponsible to then feeling down his luck to becoming more open and responsible towards the end of the film. Apologies if my way of explaining his arc is a little blunt, but there's better reviews out there that have explained better than I could, but you should see the point. His character growth is a good one, and while some might criticize the film as this is one he should have gone through already back in the classic series, I couldn't care less. As long as it's well written and engaging, I'll appreciate it. Next is Sir Topham Hatt, and I got quite a bit to say on him. It's nothing bad, in fact I really like Sir Topham Hatt in Lost Treasure. I'm in the minority who doesn't mind Topham becoming sillier as of this point forward in the show, because as long as he still acts like a strict authority figure that I can take seriously, then I'm fine with them sprinkling a little humor with him here and there. And while you can say it became more prominent starting in Series 19, don't act like he had zero strict moments from here on out. That being said, I do like how they made him a lot stricter here, showing his role as controller a lot more thoroughly. The reason I said I had a bit to say on Topham isn't because of the depiction of his character, but the reception of his character. There has been some negative reception on Topham in Lost Treasure due to his treatment towards Thomas. Now, someone's already done a better video going more into detail on this, so I'll try to keep this a little short, but check that video out if you haven't already. Basically, there are people who hate Topham in this movie. Like, a lot. Like, sure, Topham might have misunderstood the situation during the dynamite incident, but he found out the truth eventually. I guess maybe he could have gave Thomas a more outright apology for misreading the situation, as he simply says, Ryan told me everything, you did a good thing, I'm proud of you, but that's like the only problem I see with this, and even that said, it's a very minuscule issue. You have to understand what it's like from Topham's perspective, because I feel like those who hate him don't seem to take that into account. You're in charge of this busy railway, and one of your engines causes this wreck of coaches early in the morning, which is already going to cost a pretty penny to pay for. And to top it all off, he takes no responsibility for his actions and even starts blaming others for his mistake. Then, hours later, that same day, he causes another accident and once again tries to act all innocent. Then a few days later, you see what seems like your engine trying to kill your new engine with explosives. And by that point, you just about had it. From your perspective, he screwed up 3 times in under a week and cost millions of dollars in damage. Who wouldn't be angry over this? It's also clear that the reason why no one spoke up to Topham at the time is because he clearly wasn't in the best mood to be bothered with, and it'd be best to wait a while to explain to him the truth. But yeah, it sucks even when that's explained, people still don't understand why Topham was so mad. I'm not saying you have to like Topham here or as a whole, but at least understand his reason for getting upset. The fact that there's people who think Topham should have been arrested or punched for scolding at Thomas. Why? For what? Doing his job as his boss? Look, if he was anything like Sailor John and physically or emotionally abusing Thomas, then I could understand arresting. But what he did was the equivalent of a parent scolding their kid for doing something bad and being sent to their room. So you're telling me, people who hate Topham, that if you, let's say, broke something in the house due to being an idiot, and your parents scolded you and sentenced you to your room, that they should be arrested? Cause that's the impression I'm getting from these people. If I break something that costs over $100 and I'm sentenced to my room as punishment, my parent deserves to be sent to jail because apparently they're in the wrong. Do you people not think? What would you do if you were in Topham's shoes, or if you were a parent and your kid broke something that cost a lot? Please tell me, cause I'd love to know. Alright, I ran about Topham long enough. Overall, I think he was handled greatly, despite what other people will say. Marion's subplot with the Smallies is hilarious. She continues to be a great character, and I like how they finally address there being two Olivers and Marion confusing the engine and excavator for being the same character. That was clever. The only other old character who has a significant role in the movie is Henry, who was mostly shown being a wuss throughout the entire thing. It's nothing special, but I don't mind, plus it gave me my favorite Henry moment out of the entire franchise. Sorry, Super Rescue and Flying Kipper fans. Well, actually, I'm not dealing with it. Not really a nitpick, but it's kind of a shame how shafted Percy and Emily were in this movie. Obviously, they couldn't appear in The Adventure Begins, and I love getting focused on the side cast in this film, but both only got one line total, and Emily's was one singular word. Even Toby said more, and he's been gone for the last 2 films. For being Thomas's bestie and the main female character, both got neglected big during this year's movie. And that's kind of funny. Originally, I was going to give my thoughts on the plot, as for my last 2 reviews, I had extra topics to touch on, like the voices of the characters, but I already gave my thoughts on those for the new characters of this movie, so that's not needed this time. And the reason why I'm not going through with discussing the plot is because I can't think of much else to say that hasn't already. The plot and story is amazing, and I love it. If you wanted to know what exactly makes it great to me, well, if you think of this movie the same way that I and many other people do, just ask yourself what makes you enjoy this movie, and the reasons you have are probably the same as mine. As for negatives, there isn't many that I can think of, but for what those ones are, I'll list them off now. My biggest issue with Lost Treasure is how Sailor John inexplicably, without explanation, nicked a pirate ship from Allsboro and brought it all the way to the top of a random hill. Obviously, Skiff couldn't have towed that thing, so either Sailor John is secretly John Cena's great-grandpappy, or he's in cahoots with one of the engines. I'm looking at you, Toby. I also find it needless given that he probably would have had the same speed with just Skiff, and what would have happened if Thomas didn't hear them or was at Knapford? He wouldn't have to worry really about anyone going after him. Sure, Ryan and the miniature engines were there, but they didn't know what he was up to. It all just came off as a little too convenient. But I could say that for 85% of the filmography I've come across. Henry's subplot, if it was even meant to be, ends rather abruptly. I'm not bothered by it that much, but I feel like there could have been some kind of resolution, regardless of how funny his scenes were. Like I said during the character section, I would have liked it if they had Sir Tomac give Thomas a more outward apology, just like, I'm sorry for misunderstanding the situation with the dynamite, I know now that you were just trying to be really useful, yada yada yada. What we have is fine, but, still would have appreciated it. Though then again, Thomas did still indirectly cause that incident to happen, but Topham doesn't know that. One last minor issue I have is that Sailor John comes off as a little stupid for thinking Thomas had something to do with the treasure not being in the spot they thought it was. Might be a sign of him going senile for him accusing this childlike train, as well as being seemingly unaware of the people inside of his cab. Other than that, there's nothing else I have wrong with this movie, or at least nothing that I feel is noteworthy enough to mention. So, if you haven't figured it out by now, this movie is hot garbage. Nah, bro, I'm screwing with you. I love this movie, but a lot of people already do. That's nothing new. This is probably the most highly ranked Thomas movie, and I do think it deserves it. It may not be my #1 favorite, and some might consider it overrated, but I think all that matters is whether you liked it or not, and if it warrants the praise. I know I said something similar to that with my Magic Rail review, but whatever. It's your choice is all I'm saying. In conclusion, my overall score for Soder's Legend of the Lost Treasure is a 9 out of 10, and it ranks third on my Tom's Movie list. I'm not going to say what place is ahead of them, because you should hopefully know by now, and plus I'm worried I'll get shot if I mention what my second favorite is to people who don't know. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and expect my review on Calling All Engines in the following month on the 6th. So, yeah.